Hello, and welcome to the fifth annual New York City Fred T. Korematsu Day of Civil Liberties and the Constitution. I'm Stan Honda of the New York City Korematsu Day Committee. Thank you for attending our live online program. We really wish we could gather in person to honor the legacy of Fred Korematsu. We have a great program today. We'll have a terrific poetry reading from Kai Naima Williams and a powerful video with a song by Tayo Na. Federal Judge Kyo Matsumoto will give the keynote presentation. On the chat area will be Japanese translation or links to translations of the talks and presentations. To start out, we'd like to offer a land acknowledgement. The land of the 5 boroughs that make up New York City are the traditional homelands of the Lenape, Merrick, Canarsie, Rockaway, and Matinacok nations. These lands are also intertribal lands and are also under the stewardship of many more indigenous nations. New York City is home to the largest population of intertribal Native American, First Nations, and indigenous individuals out of any urban city across Turtle City or the United States. That's over 115,000 people who call this home. Some were born here with family roots in New York City and the surrounding nations that go back for generations. All contribute to the rich and diverse culture that is the New York City urban Indian community. This is their story and their experience. They are a living culture that thrives here. We acknowledge the systematic erasure of many nations and recognize those still among us today. We acknowledge the peoples of these nations, their cultures, their communities, their elders, both past and present, as well as future generations. We acknowledge and offer deep gratitude to Mannahatta, the land and waters on which we stand upon. Today would have been Fred T. Korematsu's 103rd birthday. Fred was a national civil rights hero. In 1942, at the age of 23, he refused to go to the government's incarceration camps for Japanese Americans. After he was arrested and convicted of defying the government's order, he appealed his case all the way to the Supreme Court. In 1944, the Supreme Court ruled against him in a 6-3 decision, declaring that the incarceration was not caused by racism and was justified by the Army's claim that Japanese Americans were radio signaling enemy ships from shore and were prone to disloyalty. The court called the incarceration a, quote, military necessity. In one of the 3 stinging dissents, Justice Robert Jackson complained about the lack of any evidence to justify the incarceration, writing, quote, the court has for all time validated the principle of racial discrimination. The principle then lies about like a loaded weapon, ready for the hand of any authority that can bring forward a plausible claim of an urgent need. In 1983, legal historian Peter Irons, together with researcher Aiko Herzog Yoshinaga, discovered key documents that government intelligence agencies had hidden from the Supreme Court in 1944. The documents consistently showed that Japanese Americans had committed no acts of treason to justify mass incarceration. With this new evidence, a pro bono legal team that included the Asian Law Caucus reopened Korematsu's 40-year-old case on the basis of government misconduct. On November 10th, 1983, Korematsu's personal conviction was overturned in a federal court in San Francisco. It was a pivotal moment in civil rights history. Although the ruling cleared Korematsu's conviction, the US Supreme Court's 1944 ruling still stood. In 2018, when the Supreme Court's conservative majority upheld former President Trump's ban on travel into the United States by citizens of several predominantly Muslim countries, Chief Justice John G. Roberts Jr. denounced the Korematsu decision as gravely wrong, but he did not overturn it and the ruling is still on the books. Korematsu remained an activist throughout his life. In 1998, he received the Presidential Medal of Freedom, the nation's highest civilian honor, from President Bill Clinton. Currently, his daughter, Karen Korematsu, continues his work by heading the Korematsu Institute in San Francisco and continuing his legacy as a civil rights advocate, public speaker, and public educator. And we're proud to have Karen Korematsu here as a special guest speaker. Welcome, Karen. Karen, you'll have to unmute your microphone. Sorry. There you go.
Okay, are we good? Okay, all right. Well, I'll start again. So good evening, I think it's there, New York City, and thank you, Stan, for that lovely introduction and background information. It's been kind of a challenge these days, of course, with everything, so I just kind of popped in, so to speak. But I wanted to take this opportunity to thank New York City, especially because they you all did establish Fred Korematsu Day of Civil Liberties and the Constitution in perpetuity. And so I'm grateful for that. And by the way, I always say happy birthday, Daddy, because today is his actual birthday. And I think he would just be amazed at how his day has been elevated and progressed over time, even though we have a lot of work to do ahead of us. But I want to thank all of you for helping to carry on his legacy, which is now, as we know, more important than ever. And of course, besides New York City, the other states are California, which was the first one in 2010, signed by Governor Schwarzenegger, that legislative bill, Hawaii, Commonwealth of Virginia, Florida, and even the state of Arizona. So I just met with the governor this past week and had a signing and meeting actually tomorrow with their state legislature. The House and the Senate are both, my brother and I will be there to be presented with the legislative bill. So that's very exciting. And to show the progress and that this is a bipartisan effort. And also, I would hope that I know we have New York City, and that's the biggest city in the state of New York, but we would love to have the state of New York, honor Fred Korematsu Day of Civil Liberties and the Constitution in perpetuity. And perhaps during the year you could have a letter writing campaign, because that's how the state of Florida was established, by the power of the pen and students. It was seventh graders that wrote to their state legislator after he visited them in school, and they said they wanted a Fred Korematsu Day. And so he said, well, if you write letters to us, I will create a bill. Remember the cartoon, I will create a bill? So that really worked. And then he created a bill. It was passed in their Senate, and now it was passed in the House. And believe it or not, for the state of Florida, we have Fred Korematsu Day of Civil Liberties and the Constitution in perpetuity. And it's even Congressman Mark Takano is going to issue a resolution encouraging a national Fred Korematsu Day. We've got a long ways to go because we have to have other states behind us. But that's kind of that's the ultimate goal. But more importantly, now in this time of great divide in this country, it's important to recognize that we all need to respect each other. That Fred Korematsu is an example of one man who made a difference in the face of adversity, because he didn't have the support of his Japanese American community in 1942. And in 1983, when his case was reopened, still again, the Japanese American community didn't want him to, because they said, Fred, if you lose, then we will lose our chances for redress and reparations. But he never gave up hope, and he kept the belief that he would be able to have his Supreme Court case overturned, and it did, as Stan said, in 1983. But it's still on the Supreme Court record, so it's like buyer beware. You never know when someone's going to try to pick up and use it really in a derogatory manner, and that's what we're worried about. But I want to thank all of you for honoring my father on this day, to have this further dialogue, to kind of use my father as inspiration in this time of divide in this country, to never give up hope, that we do need to work, get out of, together, to work out of our silos, to develop allyship, as the Japanese American community did after 9/11. That was quite apparent. But we have a long ways to go. And now what we're doing is to support HR 40 for African Americans in this country, to have at least a committee created for their redress. And so these are all the things that we can do. Also to promote voting, because Fred Korematsu Day of Civil Liberties in the Constitution is about civic participation, more importantly now than ever. And my work is been elevated. We've become an education advocacy organization where we're working with all 50 states on ethnic studies to be as part of the curriculum for K through 12 in their schools. I mean, California is one of them. I've been appointed as one of the ambassadors of education to the state of California, which is helping me to work with other states, because we all need to know our collective history, because history is now present. It's not just in the past, it's in the present. And in all these issues that we're faced with today, is many of it is because we don't know our past, the collective past of we honoring and recognizing the indigenous American Indians and how they've been marginalized through history, as well as Chinese Americans, Japanese American, Latinx, African Americans, even LGBTQ. So it's important that we continue this push, and continue the purposeful conversations, to even though we've got to divide. The Fred Korematsu Day of Civil Liberties and the Constitution clearly is bipartisan. And my father worked on both, believed on working on both sides of the aisle. And most of all, it was about respect for each other's differences, that we can agree to disagree and find that common ground to agree upon, so that we can build and work on these problems together. That's how we're going to make change. No one can just stay in a silo and think it's going to be done that way. And we have this opportunity in this country when we can have allyship. Back in 1942, there wasn't anyone, right? There weren't the organizations around to help. And the Japanese American community certainly has a positive position, because we've been through all that, and we can help others to address some of these problems that are happening. And I'm worried, especially like when we hear that books are being banned from schools, and books being banned in Texas, books being banned in Tennessee. This is, I know that New York is a much more, progressive and diversified state, but we still have, you're a big state and a powerful state, and you have that position to help others. So this is the work that we're doing. The Korematsu Institute has tons of work. Believe you me, we're working on a traveling exhibit, actually, that through the National Park Service, that we want to tour the country, not only talking about the Japanese American incarceration and those lessons, but to bring in the relevancy of our issues today and include the marginalization of all communities, that where we can have these discussions in those areas of the United States that are being challenged by, let's say, negative rhetoric, because also the purpose of our work is to fight and educate about hate, the hate and violence that we're seeing in this country. So thank you for giving me this opportunity to say hello, and remember my father's words: stand up for what is right, and when you see something wrong, don't be afraid to speak up. Thank you.
Thank you, Karen, for those great words. And you're right, stand up for what is right. Thank you very much for addressing our Korematsu Day program. And I'm sure it's a very, very busy day for you.
Yes.
But thanks very much for stopping by. This is that was great for us to hear from you.
Thank you.
9 other states, because of Karen, have now recognized Fred T. Korematsu Day in perpetuity. And that's a great idea to try to get New York State, for those of us here in New York City, to get New York State on board to have a Korematsu Day. In New York City, in 2015, New York City Council member Danny Drum had the opportunity to celebrate Fred Korematsu's life with Karen and the United Federation of Teachers. Inspired by what he had heard, Councilmember Drum introduced Resolution 792 in 2015 to recognize January 30th in New York City as Fred T. Korematsu Day of Civil Liberties and the Constitution. After 2.5 years, on December 19, 2017, the council voted unanimously for the bill and created a New York City Korematsu Day in perpetuity. We'd like to offer a general appreciation of New York City Japanese American community who worked with Councilman Drum and helped lead the way nationally by helping to secure creation of the Korematsu Day that is celebrated annually here. As Karen mentioned, in recent years, the national Japanese American community has responded vigorously to new attacks on civil liberties and targeting of Black, Indigenous, and people of color communities and immigrants. This day has continued significance in its call for solidarity and upholding of the rights of every person. Fred's spirit lives on in our continued commitment to his principles. Next on our program is an amazing music video with many excellent images of Asian Americans, including many taken by my friend Corky Lee. A year ago, on January 27th, we lost Corky Lee, a huge advocate for the Asian American community. The Chinese American photographer could be seen at virtually every Asian American event around New York City, and often in other parts of the country. In the 1970s, Corky was a community organizer on the Lower East Side and began documenting conditions there. As his work grew, he described the combination of activism and documentation as, quote, acts of photographic justice. Corky was determined to restore Asian Americans' contributions to the historical record. He photographed most of the important milestones of various communities, including the redress hearings for Japanese American incarcerees in the 1980s, our Day of Remembrance, and Fred T. Korematsu Day programs. He was very active in the National Asian American Journalists Association, helping young photojournalists. After being one of the most careful citizens in the city, Corky died of COVID at the age of 73. The Japanese American and Asian American communities will miss him. Now on to the video with a song co-written by Tayo Na. Let me introduce Tayo, who is a writer, educator, and musician living on an unceded Lenape Canarsie land, also known as Queens, New York. His work spans over 2 decades of cultural and pedagogical contributions to urban communities. He was honored in 2010 by Governor David A. Paterson in the state of New York for his legacy of leadership to the Asian American community and the Empire State. The 2010-2011 collaboration album, Home Word, under the outfit Magnetic North and Tayo Na, including a number of chart-topping songs in Asia, and his Artist Takeovers playlist was featured on Spotify in 2017. His writing has appeared in Aperture, Poet's House, and Unmargin, and he is a 2020 VONA Voices alum for writing fiction. As an educator, his area of practice includes transformative justice, culturally responsive pedagogy, and coaching basketball. You can find him on Instagram, Twitter, and YouTube at TAIYONA. So thank you, Tayo, and take it away with the video.
Thank you, Stan, and the whole committee for having me. I apologize for that long bio. I miss seeing you all in person. You know, I go way back with this community. Since 2001, when we had that event with Janice Minikutani and Maya Angelou. Rest in power, rest in peace to them, to Corky Lee as well. So many of us been doing this work for such a long time, and to not be able to be in person has been a real loss. But all the more special and meaningful that we can do this virtually, and still continue this work while we are in this pandemic. Um, as far as this video is concerned, it's really a song that's been passed down a few generations now, like a talisman. The first iteration of this song was by Chris Ajima, who recorded this in 1980. It was called Asian Song. And fast forward to about the early 2000s, Tamie's son, Akira, gave me this idea that this should be a hip hop song as well. And so around 2009, 2010, we did this song in a new way and called it We Belong. Fast forward to last year, and given the Atlanta shooting and the rise in anti-Asian violence, my music partner, Teresa Tivu, said, hey, we got to do this again. So this is We Belong 21, in response to the anti-Asian violence that is still going on. And it's definitely a tribute to Corky Lee and all of those in our community who are using their voices and their art as a sword for justice and liberation.
I'm here, grew up on the shores of America. Open up shop, brand stores in America. Wash windows, clean floors in America. Only trust me with your chores in America. Just need one open door in America. Cry when we elected 44 for America. My family's here, fought wars for America. On TV, just a whore for America. I get the memo, this is your America. Take my money, tax phones in America. Take a food charge more in America. Use a culture for decor in America. History that you can't ignore. America, I'm the leader I was looking for. America, never silent, keep the score. America, and this time I needed it more. We're still here, we're going strong, and we're getting tired of proving we belong. We're still here, we're going strong, and we're getting tired of proving we belong. Proving we belong.
Wait, but what's changed? Difference, just names. Xiao Zhao, Yao Sun, Jia, know these names. Young Jung Soon, Jung Young, hey, we have names. Victims, silence, evicted from our lives. Cause our skin is the color they love to villainize. But if it's food, we do women they love to fetishize. But if it's COVID-19, then it's China virus. Fuck these colonizers, calling us outsiders. We built this country too, and they built it alongside us. One generation, two generation, three. To the young generation, you generate me. So T, Tayo, Aaron, and Chucky, and anyone that feels like a guest in their country, and everyone somebody to the struggle of uniting along the promise of my people, y'all really see it.
We're going strong, and we're getting tired of proving we belong. We're still here, we're going strong, and we're getting tired of proving we belong. Proving we belong.
I wash the clothes, and these hands that serve the food ever know. My neck is filled, the mob's roping, it's been behind barbed wire. My arms have nailed down railroad track, our back is bent for higher. These hands have fought justice and the swords on fire. We belong to each other, the magnitude and bomb, black feminist scholarship, indigenous songs, belonging at the center like ethnic studies. Be the Robin Hood and invest in us, we live and pledge acts abundantly. Abolition is healing our suffering, belonging our purpose to the ones in need. Cause if one ain't got it, ain't no one free. I speak from the streets of Lanabe King. All my relations need reparations. Power to the people, our disposition belongs to the land with First Nations permission. Mark 2, the word that was written when we decolonize. We belong to wisdom, the cry for liberty, the right side of the history. Always said the bigotry, separately finished. We're going strong, and we're getting tired of proving we belong. We're still here, we're going strong, and we're getting tired of proving we belong. Proving we belong.
Oh my goodness. Thank you so much, Tayo, for sharing this really moving and beautiful song and video as a part of our program today. My name is Becca Asaki, and I am one of many as a part of the Fred Korematsu Day Organizing Committee here in New York. And I have the honor right now of introducing our keynote speaker today. It's Kiyo Matsumoto. Kiyo Matsumoto was appointed as the United States District Judge for the Eastern District of New York in July of 2008, after serving as a U.S. Magistrate Judge for the Eastern District of New York since July of 2004. She was the second Asian American female judge appointed to the federal Article III bench, and she earned her bachelor's degree with high honors from the University of California, Berkeley. Following her graduation from Georgetown University Law Center, Judge Matsumoto was a litigation associate in Seattle, Washington. And thereafter, she joined the U.S. Attorney's Office for the Chief of the Civil Division. Judge Matsumoto has taught at the Attorney General's Advocacy Institute and was an adjunct professor at the Brooklyn Law School and New York University School of Law. She served as a trustee and vice chair of the board and president of the Inn of Court for the Federal Bar Council, a member of the Judiciary Committee, the Federal Courts Committee, the Nominating Committee, chair of the Honors Committee, and a member of the board of the New York City Bar Association, vice chair of the Mayor's Committee on the City Marshals, and a member of the Asian American Bar Association of New York, National Asian Pacific American Bar Association, the U.S. Japan Council, Japan American Association, the American Inn of the Court, the American Bar Association Standards Review Committee, and the National Conference of Bar Examiners, and a member of the United States Judicial Conference Committee on the Administration of the Magistrate Judges System. So if that all wasn't impressive enough to get you excited about having her on as our keynote speaker, I'm really excited to introduce Judge Matsumoto.
I'd like to thank you all very much for inviting me to share your tribute to Fred Korematsu. He was a modest man and a great American hero. Today, as we reflect upon the man and his courageous legacy, I'd like to just think about how he inspires all of us to carry on his struggle for justice. I'd like to thank the organizers and participants of this event. I know how much hard work you've all done. I'd also like to thank the Asian American Bar Association of New York, who, with Second Circuit Judge Denny Chin and Kathy Hirata Chin, organized the creation and presentation of a well-received reenactment of Fred Korematsu's legal challenge to our government's race-based exclusion and mass incarceration of over 112,000 individuals of Japanese ancestry living in the United States. Tonight, we are using excerpts and photos from that presentation as part of my remarks. What do we know about Fred Korematsu, and what lessons can we learn from his challenge during times of national outrage against persons of Japanese ancestry here in the United States? Fred Korematsu challenged our government's unconstitutional acts based on so-called military necessity and continued his fight for justice and equality until he passed away. A brief review of the historical context leading up to Mr. Korematsu's challenge and legalized discrimination against persons of Asian ancestry provides us with some context. Federal law prohibited naturalization of Asian immigrants until 1952. In two separate decisions based on a 1790 naturalization law, the United States Supreme Court in Takao Ozawa versus United States and United States versus Bhagat Singh Thind upheld immigration laws denying American citizenship to a Japanese and Indian Sikh who had lived lawfully and productively in the United States for decades. The Supreme Court ruled that because a Japanese and an Indian Sikh were not white or of African descent, federal immigration law barred them from becoming naturalized US citizens. As non-citizens, Japanese immigrants were prohibited from owning land in California by the California Alien Land Law of 1913. In the years leading up to World War II, The press fanned the fires of anti-Asian sentiment, and economic resentment against Japanese farmers and businesses increased, especially on the West Coast of the United States. Fred Korematsu, a second-generation Nisei, was the third of 4 sons of Japanese immigrants. Kakusaburo Korematsu and Kotsui Aoki, who arrived in the United States in 1905. Fred was born on this day 103 years ago on January 30th, 1919, in Oakland, California, and given the name Toyo Saburo. Saburo means third son. An elementary school teacher asked him if he would like to be called Fred, and he liked the name and used it thereafter. Fred and his brothers attended Oakland Public Schools, and he joined sports teams and the Boy Scouts. He and his brothers worked in their parents' flower business, and the family became active in San Lorenzo Japanese Holiness Church. Fred realized that when he was in school each day, he started the Pledge of Allegiance to the American flag. He stated, "I studied American history and the Constitution of the United States, and I believed that persons in this country were free and had equal rights." In 1940, when Fred was just 21 years old, Congress established the first peacetime draft, and Fred registered the first day. He was classified a 4F due to gastric ulcers and was not able to serve. Eager to support the government's preparedness for war, he got a job as a welder in a shipyard, but he was soon fired due to his Japanese ancestry. Thereafter, while relaxing with his Italian-American girlfriend in the hills above Oakland on December 7th, 1941, Fred heard on the radio that the Japanese had bombed Pearl Harbor. There was no evidence that Japanese Americans were engaged in sabotage and espionage, but General John L. DeWitt, West Coast Army commander, recommended to Secretary of War Henry L. Stimson the mass removal and incarceration of all residents of Japanese ancestry. General DeWitt illogically explained the lack of evidence as follows. "The very fact that no sabotage has taken place to date is a disturbing and confirming indication that such action will be taken." 2 months after the attack on Pearl Harbor, on February 19th, 1942, President Franklin Roosevelt issued Executive Order 9066. Executive Order 9066 granted authority to Secretary of War Stimson to designate exclusion zones from which any or all persons of Japanese ancestry could be excluded on grounds of military necessity. Although initially concerned about the constitutional implications of the wholesale race-based evacuation, Secretary Stimson authorized General DeWitt to implement the order the very next day. A series of public proclamations followed that imposed a curfew on all persons of Japanese ancestry and other enemy aliens, and removed all persons of Japanese ancestry from designated military areas consisting of parts of Washington, Oregon, California, and Arizona. Congress also passed Public Law 503, making it a crime to violate any such military orders. Although Fred's family chose to comply with this evacuation order, abandoning their home and flower business, Fred defied the order for a simple and human reason. He wanted to stay with his girlfriend. At her suggestion, he tried plastic surgery, and he altered his identification papers to use the name Clyde Sarah. On May 8th, 1942, his family reported as ordered by Civilian Exclusion Order number 34, and they were imprisoned in horse stables at the Tanforan Racetrack Assembly Center. On Memorial Day, May 30th, 1942, while walking with his girlfriend in San Lorenzo, 23-year-old Fred was arrested and imprisoned for defying Executive Order 9066. An attorney and executive director of the ACLU, Ernest Fessig, visited Fred in jail and obtained Fred's agreement to be a plaintiff in the ACLU's test case. Fred was transferred to the Presidio Stockade and then to Tanforan, where he was chastised by his parents and his brothers for his arrest and the shame that he brought upon his family. In September 1942, Fred's family was moved to the more permanent concentration camp in Topaz, Utah, where Fred was viewed by some inmates as a criminal and as someone who was more white than Japanese. My own mother's family was also incarcerated at Topaz, while some of my uncles fought for the United States Armed Forces in Europe as members of the highly decorated Nisei 442nd and 100th Infantry Battalions. While at Tanforan, Fred was introduced to by Mr. Bessig to attorney Wayne Collins, who defended the criminal charges against Fred based on the deprivation of his constitutional rights. At trial, the government called only one witness, FBI Special Agent Oliver Mansfield, who became involved in the case after the San Lorenzo police called the FBI following Fred's arrest. He was charged with remaining in an excluded military zone. The agent testified that Mr. Korematsu admitted that he was of Japanese ancestry and that he remained in the area even though he knew it was prohibited to remain in an area from which all Japanese ancestries had been excluded. When he was arrested, Fred was in possession of a draft registration certificate and a notice of classification card in the name of Clyde Sarah. Fred told the FBI agent that he wanted to remain in America, in Alameda County, because of friendly relationships with people there, and that he considered himself an American and did not want to be evacuated. He said he wanted to disguise his identity because his name, Korematsu, would give him away as Japanese, and for that reason, he adopted the name Clyde Sarah. Mr. Collins called Fred Korematsu to testify in his own defense. After describing his family and noting his educational background and his American citizenship and his refusal to co-register as a Japanese citizen, he testified also to his loyalty only to the United States and willingness to bear arms for the United States, despite being medically disqualified. Fred described his work as a welder on ships used in the war effort and his limited Japanese language ability. The court ultimately found Fred Toyosaburo Korematsu guilty as charged and sentenced him to serve a suspended sentence of 5 years probation. Under ordinary circumstances, he would have been permitted to go free, subject to supervision. However, the military police immediately took Fred into custody, and he was detained at Tanforan until he was transferred to be with his family at Topaz. Mr. Collins filed an appeal to the Ninth Circuit Court of Appeals for Fred, and they heard the government's procedural challenge to Fred's appeal on the same day as the appeals of two other Niseis who had violated General DeWitt's orders. Minoru Yasui was a 25-year-old attorney in Portland, Oregon, when the curfew order was issued. Unable to find a client willing to contest the curfew, Mr. Yasui contested it himself and was convicted of violating the curfew. Gordon Hirabayashi was a 24-year-old senior at the University of Washington. He was convicted of violating both the curfew and the order of exclusion. After hearing argument, the Ninth Circuit passed the 3 cases to the Supreme Court, which decided to hear the Yasui and Hirabayashi cases together and allowed Fred's appeal to go forward in the Ninth Circuit. The Supreme Court upheld the exclusion and curfew orders and the conviction of Hirabayashi and Yasui on the same day, relying on ethnic affiliations. Justice Harlan Fiske Stone delivered the opinion of the court, stating in part, "We cannot close our eyes to the fact that in time of war, residents having ethnic affiliations with an invading enemy may be a greater source of danger than those of a different ancestry. We decide only that the curfew order as applied was within the bounds of the war power." On December 2nd, 1943, the Ninth Circuit affirmed Fred's conviction without hearing further argument, although Circuit Judge Denman expressed the following reservations. He said, "Americans are to face a peace table at which our prestige and power will rest upon the belief of a world questioning Caucasian authority and sincerity, a world which includes 1 billion Asiatics. There, no one will shut his eyes to the Postons, Manzanars, and Tanforans." These are all American prison camps incarcerating Japanese. One of the questions, he wrote, will be, what sort of judicial consideration do minority groups in America get from courts of acclaimed democracy. The Supreme Court heard 2 days of oral argument in Mr. Korematsu's case on October 11th and 12th, 1944, before a packed courtroom. Mr. Collins argued on behalf of Mr. Korematsu with attorney James Horsky. His lawyers argued principally that the removal orders were unconstitutional because they were not based on any genuine military necessity, and that the exclusion program was in reality a detention program. On December 18th, 1944, the court rejected Fred Korematsu's challenge to the exclusion order, citing Hirabayashi. Justice Black wrote for the majority, stating in relevant part, "We uphold the exclusion order. In doing so, we are not unmindful of the hardships imposed upon a large group of American citizens, but hardships are part of war." Korematsu was not excluded from the military area because of hostility to him or his race. He was excluded because we are at war with the Japanese Empire, because the military authorities feared an invasion on our West Coast and felt constrained to take proper measures, which demand that all citizens of Japanese ancestry be segregated from the West Coast temporarily. He also noted that there was evidence of disloyalty on the part of some, and the military considered it necessary to remove all Japanese. 3 justices wrote dissenting opinions which concerned the constitutional deprivations that all Japanese Americans faced. Justice Roberts wrote, "I dissent because I think the indisputable facts exhibit a clear violation of constitutional rights. This is a case of convicting a citizen as a punishment for not submitting to imprisonment in a concentration camp based on his ancestry and solely because of his ancestry, without evidence or inquiry concerning his loyalty and good disposition toward the United States. I would reverse the judgment of conviction." Justice Murphy wrote, "This exclusion of all persons of Japanese ancestry, both alien and non-alien, from the Pacific Coast area on a plea of military necessity goes over the very brink of constitutional power and falls into the ugly abyss of racism." He called the government's justification largely an accumulation of much of the misinformation and half-truths and insinuations that have been directed against Japanese Americans by people with racial and economic prejudice. He noted that not one person of Japanese ancestry was accused or convicted of espionage or sabotage after Pearl Harbor. Justice Murphy dissented and concluded as follows: "I dissent from this legalization of racism. Racial discrimination in any form and in any degree has no justifiable part whatever in our democratic way of life. All residents of this nation are kin in some way by blood or culture to a foreign land. Yet they are primarily and necessarily a part of the new and distinct civilization of the United States. Accordingly, they must be treated at all times as the heirs to the American experiment and as entitled to all the rights and freedoms guaranteed by the Constitution." And finally, as Stan pointed out, Justice Jackson wrote a scathing dissent. "Korematsu was born on our soil of parents born in Japan. The Constitution makes him a citizen of the United States by nativity and a citizen of California by residence. No claims made that he is not loyal to this country. Korematsu, however, has been convicted of an act not commonly a crime. It consisted merely of being present in the state whereof he is a citizen, near the place where he was born and where all his life he has lived. He made the observation that this decision lies about like a loaded weapon, ready in the future." When Ernest Bessig wrote to Fred to tell him that the Supreme Court had ruled against him, he was working in Detroit, Michigan, near his brothers. Though his application for indefinite leave from Topaz had been granted, his parents remained in prison there. Fred wrote back to Bessig and thanked him, the ACLU, and Wayne Collins. In October 1946, Fred married Catherine Pearson, a woman of English, German, Irish extraction who had earned a master's degree in medical technology and who had heard of Fred's case. She recalled that he was never bitter about it, but he later admitted that he never gave up his hope that someday he would be able to challenge his conviction. Like other Japanese Americans released from the prison camps, Fred attempted to rebuild his life. Striving to put his detention and other Japanese American detention experiences behind them, many Nisei, including Fred, avoided talking about it, even with their own children. As a result, both Fred's children, Karen and Ken, found out about their father's case as juniors in high school in history class. And this underscores the importance, as Karen Korematsu stated, about teaching us about our full American history. When Karen confronted her father, she was struck by how painful it was for him to admit that yes, his case had gone to the Supreme Court, but he still had a criminal record. She did not pursue the conversation after that. Gradually, however, Japanese Americans began to press for the relief and redress. In America's bicentennial year 1976, President Gerald Ford formally terminated Executive Order 9066, acknowledging the need for the nation to recognize our national mistakes and to avoid repeating them. On July 31st, 1980, President Jimmy Carter signed legislation establishing the Commission on Wartime Relocation and Internment of Civilians to investigate the claim that the incarceration of Japanese Americans during World War II was in fact justified by military necessity. The commission held 20 days of hearings throughout the country and heard from 750 witnesses. Although Fred's case was the subject of testimony, Fred himself chose not to testify. His hope was still to somehow reopen his case, but he could not imagine how. Nearly 40 years later, after the Supreme Court's decision, Fred Korematsu received a call and then a visit from Professor Peter Irons and Aiko Herzig Yoshinaga in January 1982. They had uncovered memoranda from a Justice Department attorney who tried without success to convince his superior to disclose to the Supreme Court that military intelligence reports found no evidence of Japanese American espionage or sabotage and had in fact recommended against the mass incarceration of Japanese. The Justice Department lawyer warned that failure to disclose these reports might approximate the suppression of evidence. That evidence was not disclosed. Mr. Korematsu asked Professor Irons to assist him with overturning his conviction. Irons had also obtained consent from Minoru Yasui in Portland and Gordon Hirabayashi in Seattle to reopen their cases, and soon 3 legal teams comprised principally of Sansei lawyers, third-generation Japanese Americans, were hard at work. Dale Minami became lead counsel for the Korematsu case and coordinating counsel for all 3 cases. After Professor Irons contacted him, Mr. Minami called attorneys with experience in civil rights who enthusiastically joined the effort to challenge their parents' incarceration. Catherine Banai, Peggy Nagai, and Rod Kamokami helped recruit a host of attorneys to take the enormous risks of handling monumental civil rights cases without a fee, while struggling to make their own livings as private attorneys in their own firms. Joined by other volunteer attorneys like Don Tamaki, then director of the Asian Law Caucus, Eric Yamamoto, who declined partnership in a Hawaiian law firm to join the legal team, and Ed Chen, then an ACLU lawyer and now a federal judge in San Francisco, the group developed an overall legal strategy on behalf of Mr. Korematsu, Hirabayashi, and Yasui that relied on an arcane and little used legal procedure called error coram nobis. This allows a defendant to seek relief from criminal convictions already served on the basis of errors of the most fundamental nature, amounting to manifest injustice. This new generation of dedicated Asian American attorneys ultimately obtained orders vacating the wartime convictions of Korematsu, Hirabayashi, and Yasui. After his conviction was vacated, Fred didn't give up the fight. He then devoted his efforts to seeking redress and reparations for those incarcerated because of their Japanese ancestry during World War II. Despite his quiet nature, Fred readily spoke up when called upon to support redress for the survivors of the incarceration. On August 10th, 1988, President Ronald Reagan signed the Civil Liberties Act of 1988, which provided a formal apology and redress of $20,000 to each survivor. As Korematsu had been laid off from his job when he told his boss that he had reopened his case, the money was a help to him, but hardly sufficient to fully compensate all of the detainees' losses. Fred Korematsu was not a polished speaker, but his audience connected with his plain-spoken, self-effacing manner. He received countless awards, including the highest civilian honor, the Presidential Medal of Freedom, on January 15th, 1998. In introducing Fred, Bill Clinton noted, "In the long history of our country's constant search for justice, some names of ordinary citizens stand for millions of souls. Today, we add the name of Fred Korematsu." President Clinton described Fred as an ordinary American who took an extraordinary stand. Fred passed away on March 30th, 2005 at the age of 96. Some 700 people attended his funeral service, including his legal team and the United States District Judge Patel, who had vacated his conviction. America the Beautiful was selected for the final hymn for its words about brotherhood from sea to shining sea. Legal team member Ed Chen recalled that this stanza described the America that Fred envisioned, one true to its founding principles. On May 20th, 2011, Neil Katyal, the first Asian American to act as Solicitor General of the United States, posted a statement on the Department of Justice's website entitled "Confession of Error: The Solicitor General's Mistakes During the Japanese American Internment Cases." This was the Justice Department's first public acknowledgement of the past Solicitor General's failure to disclose to the Supreme Court that there was no evidence supporting the uprooting and confinement of more than 100,000 people of Japanese descent. The Supreme Court then heard a case challenging the ban of visitors in 2018. In furtherance of her father's legacy to remind Americans of the dangers of disregarding the Constitution in the name of national security, Karen Korematsu, together with the children of Gordon Hirabayashi and Min Yasui, asked the Supreme Court to reject President Trump's executive orders banning immigration from predominantly Muslim countries and to repudiate the court's decisions in their father's cases. On June 26, 2018, the Supreme Court ruled on the third version of the travel ban in Trump versus Hawaii. In his majority opinion, Chief Justice Roberts upheld the travel ban, but addressed the Korematsu case without explicitly overruling it as follows. He wrote, "The dissent invokes Korematsu versus United States. Whatever rhetorical advantage the dissent may see in doing so, Korematsu has nothing to do with this case. The forcible relocation of US citizens to concentration camps solely and explicitly on the basis of race is objectively unlawful and outside the scope of presidential authority. The dissent's reference to Korematsu, however, affords this court the opportunity to make express what is already obvious. Korematsu was gravely wrong the day it was decided, has been overruled in the court of history, and, to be clear, has no place in law under the Constitution." Justice Sotomayor, in a dissent joined by Justice Ruth Bader Ginsburg, stated, "In the intervening years since Korematsu, our nation has done much to leave its sordid legacy behind. Today, the court takes the important step of finally overruling Korematsu." Now, there's some debate whether, in fact, it was overruled. This formal repudiation of a shameful precedent is laudable and long overdue, but it does not make the majority's decision here acceptable or right. By blindly accepting the government's misguided invitation to sanction a discriminatory policy motivated by animosity toward a disfavored group, all in the name of a superficial claim of national security, the court redeploys the same dangerous logic underlying Korematsu and merely replaces one gravely wrong decision with another. I'd like to thank you again for allowing me to share Fred Korematsu's honoring today. He is a man whose profound courage and relentless pursuit of justice should inspire us all to continue his legacy. Thank you very much.
Thank you, Judge Matsumoto, for sharing your expertise and contextualizing Fred Korematsu's case within a long history of both racial and state violence and resistance to that violence. My name is April Gore, and I'm also part of the New York Fred Korematsu Day Committee, and it is my pleasure to introduce our next performance, a poem by Kai Naima Williams. Kai is a storyteller, poet, and performer based in New York City. She is the co-founder and executive director of Eat at the Table Theater Company, a nonprofit arts organization dedicated to providing actors of color with performance opportunities. She is the 2018 winner of the Tennessee Williams Literary Festival Fiction Award and the 2019 recipient of the Monroe Prize for Excellence in African American Studies. And she has been honored by the National Young Arts Foundation and the New York Times. She is also the author of the chapter book, He Tried to Drown the Ocean, I Waved. Her writing has been featured in Mask Magazine, Drome Magazine, Louisiana Literature, Stirring Lit, Abolition Is, and CRWN Magazine, and she has performed in showcases for Densho, Planned Parenthood, Saki for South Asian Women, and as part of the freshman class at Bowery Poetry. Welcome, Kai.
Thank you, April, so much for that introduction. Hello, everyone, and thank you to the rest of the organizers as well for having me. I'm so honored to participate in this program and to celebrate Fred Korematsu with you all. His pursuit of justice reminds me that there is a long legacy of resistance to racist incarceration that exists in our communities and that continues to ground us in ongoing struggle. It is so important to have these footholds in history to return to, memories of resistance that we can hold and that can hold us up as we chart a path towards a different future. I wanted to say that right now in New York City, where I am, people have been fighting for the closure of Rikers Island Prison while also protesting the city's plan to close Rikers only on the condition of opening up new jails across 4 boroughs. And with the construction of these jails, our city continues the same oppressive systems of imprisonment under the guise of reform, compromise, and placating our communities. This is a plan to ensure and secure a future of control over the people who are the most vulnerable to state-sanctioned violence. But we must build a different future, a future where racist incarceration is obsolete. And when I am told that such a future is impossible, I think of ancestors like Fred Korematsu, who persisted in fighting his conviction years after the Supreme Court initially ruled against him. I look to his example and remember that we must always decline the conditions that are served to us when they are unjust, and to remind ourselves that these conditions are not immutable and that they can be changed. I'm about to share a poem. It's called Radical Imagination. When I wrote the poem, I recalled my own ancestors, both those who were incarcerated in Japanese American prison camps and those who were enslaved in the American South. I wanted to envision a world of their making with limitless possibilities for freedom, and I hope it may speak to some of your hopes and dreams as well. So, without further ado, this is Radical Imagination, and I open with a quote by Mumia Abu-Jamal. Radical imagination. Conventional wisdom would have one believe that it is insane to resist this, the mightiest of empires. But what history really shows us is that today's empire is tomorrow's ashes, that nothing lasts forever. In this, our new country, I gather my children, say, how lucky you are to grow up out of ashes. We have buried all the emperors for you to play with your cousins on the grass their bodies give, the only thing they had to offer the earth in the end. For you to run free through prairies, hills, forests, and fields that belong to none of us. Because in this country, we sidestep the grave error of etching our names onto everything with its own language. Instead, we let the land break our tongues over its own pronunciation. This time, the land tells us how we can be of use, and we train our ears to receive. And that was just the first decree. In this, our new country, where it is not a crime to come from somewhere else, and citizenship is granted upon reenactment of one's most beloved proverb, since every other is part of one, another blended harmony standing out in a national anthem. And you can be a bended knee, or raised fist, or palm over heart, since in this country, we mind our own business. Don't tell nobody how to move against the swell of song. In the old empire, they labeled us poison while letting the life out of water, isolated us like illness in the body they drew us into, a body they invaded first and claimed to have came to consciousness inside. They constellated the land with confinement, cut fences and clamped circles round whole demographics, from the knowingest grandmother to the freshest son, who never got the chance to be alive and young enough not to be hated by his country. They shut us into camps, concentrated their eyes on our entire lives, registered our birthdays. They took fishermen for spies, then handed them back to our families broken into scales. They swiped our language and left their skeletons of folk tales. They closed us into prisons while plantations stayed open for white people to throw weddings on. They closed in at the protests and beat us open, as if to batter their obsession, blood, taste for blackness out on all the bodies their batons could touch. And I know it may be irresponsible to use the word we. Presumptuous pronoun, us, in a poem, but this is a country, and we made us a possibility, an even plane, a wilderness of differences with the same height, the same healthcare, the same rights, the same blood, the same children. And I am an us, a mixture of countries and blood that met as comrades and created the same children. My ancestors come to my candle, whisper. We suffered different beneath the same rules, but our resistances rub shoulders, and the shared muscle is you. They told me that so I could tell you, my children. We have burned it all down for you. There are no prisons, only gardens, no wardens, only women with an eye on your progress as you make it home late at night. There are no cops, just your girls running up to form a chain, just witches twitching to twist up a perp's name with their tongues. There are no reservations, only free feast programs running from coast to coast, no cages, only open bars for boarders to mingle with hosts. We have every reason to toast the grand old guardsmen of convention because they were so wrong. We, the natives, survived the end they promised would never come, and we marched on. At some point, with our backs turned, the past entombed itself in glass, renamed itself history. We thought their war on us would always last, but here you are, blessed progeny of protest, anointed with ash, uprising every dawn. Thank you so much for having me.
Oh my goodness, thank you so much, Kai, for sharing that beautiful piece that really links our ancestors and our current struggles for freedom. It was really lovely to have that as part of our program. And unfortunately, we are coming to a close for our program today, but we'd first like to say a few closing words. And then I think that we will be inviting folks to share questions or comments and reflections for tonight.
First, thank you to Tayo Na for a moving song and video that inspired us and reminded us of our long history of joy and resistance, to Anrong Shu for directing the video, and to Krish Ejima for being the musical inspiration for We Belong. Thank you to Judge Kyo Matsumoto for engaging and enlightening words that teach us about a place in history we as a community can look to, for example, as well as remind us that this work has yet to be completed. Thank you to Kai Williams for a powerful poem that pushed us to imagine what liberation might look like, and imagining that compels us to act. Thank you to the New York Fred Korematsu Day Committee for organizing this space for us to feel and to learn. Thank you for everyone who made the time to attend this event and truly made this a community space.
Yeah, so we hope that you can leave here today strengthened by our history of resistance, energized by the power of art and language, and empowered to plug into movements that are leading resistance all around us. In particular, we want to invite you to join us virtually on Saturday, February 19th from 1 to 3 p.m. Eastern. It'll be our annual New York Day of Remembrance program. This year marks the 80th anniversary of the Executive Order 9066 that we talked about today, and we hope that you'll be able to join in us in honoring our survivors and engaging with us in our program focused on repair and reparations. So I think we're going to close out for right now, but we're going to have a bit of an informal question and answer for those who like to stay on.